This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Dr. Lara May, and you're an advanced practice pharmacist, functional medicine health coach, and master intuitive teacher and healer. And I want to welcome you to the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can see that icon up there. It says listen on Newsly. And you see scrolling below. For those who are listening or watching, if they use coupon code GHOST and get 1 month free premium subscription on that platform, you can try it out. And we are going to be on there later tonight. We are a featured podcast on that platform. That's an audio only platform. So you can listen to the podcast wherever you're on the go on Newsly. And I want to let people know that we're actually at episode 984 of the Family Electric Ghost podcast. We've been on the air since 2016, tracking on an Apple podcast, getting closer to episode 1000. And then we also have your website, which is www.drlaramay.com/sessions. That will be fully clickable when we're published, so people can go and click through that and get right to your website. So what happens if people click on that URL?
So on that page, they have 3 options. They can choose an intuitive healing session, they can choose functional medicine, or life coaching. If you want something customized, I'm more than happy to do that. Actually, most of my packages end up being fully customized anyway. And you can just email me directly at laramay@drlaramay.com. And if you just put in ghost in the subject line, then I'll know that you listen to this show.
Oh, cool. Thank you. So I want to maybe talk about your background as a doctor and as a pharmacist and a health coach. You got a lot of roles. You're a teacher, healer. I don't know where you want to start with your background for the audience. Maybe you can decide how you want to tell that story.
Well, we can go in chronological order. So I am a Western medicine trained pharmacist, clinical pharmacist, advanced practice in the state of California. That just means that as a pharmacist, I actually practice at the same level as an NP, a nurse practitioner, or a PA, which says a lot for the expansion of the field of pharmacists as practitioners and our impact on patient care. But beyond that, the reason I became a functional medicine practitioner and a health coach and then an energy medicine practitioner myself is because of my own health struggles. I was diagnosed with IBS at 23. Before that, I was already suffering with chronic migraines, and really nothing was helping. A good chiropractic adjustment every now and then could maybe help stave off or lengthen the cycle of my migraines. But really, by the time I hit my mid-30s, my body, I felt like, was falling apart. And I was at a crossroads physically, mentally, emotionally. And I found myself lying on the cold hospital pharmacy floor in the middle of the night, working a graveyard shift in the throes of a debilitating migraine with all the lights off. And I just thought, I can't continue on like this, because at the time, my commute to and from work was an hour each way, 70 miles. So, not only once I got off work, wow, I was still gonna have to deal with this migraine on trying to get home. So I started looking for other options. I said, I was already seeing a chiropractor, and chiropractors are great. I love them. But I found one. My first functional medicine practitioner was also a chiropractor, and she really exposed me just to a deeper level of how the body works. And what functional medicine is a root cause approach. It's a systems-based approach, meaning that we don't just look at, in this case, the migraines, for example, just looking at your head or your nervous system. We're looking at the whole body. What are you eating? How is your gut health? The gut health is, the key, the core, the basis for, I think, really the foundation for the rest of our health and how it is either thriving or not. So I started there, and along the same line, parallel, like I said, I was not in a great emotional or mental place either. So I thought, well, I'll try this thing called Reiki and see if that helps me just release some of this anxiety and just this. I was at that time just like generally not happy in life. And so I found that merging those two modalities together provided not only, yes, emotional and mental help and relief, but so much of what was going on physically with my IBS flares, coming and going so frequently too, everything started to calm down in conjunction with the two. So, and then I realized, as doing more research and digging deeper, that pharmacists can be functional medicine practitioners too. Like we actually have a great foundation with our previous education to know how the body works, not only like how medicines work, but also how supplements work. And,
Mhm.
are they interacting? Can they be taken together? Once you're on this supplement, do you necessarily need the pharmaceutical, and vice versa? So I think it's really interesting. And there's a whole group of us out there, functional medicine pharmacists. So um, we're growing, and I think we're also like really pushing towards and growing towards the medical team. And when I say the medical team, I'm talking about having your acupuncturist, your massage therapist, your functional medicine practitioner, and your GP, or your primary care physician. So and all of these practitioners working together in concert to create the best health and well-being for their patient client, but that client patient is involved as well, and they're actually the ones running the show. So that's my version of patient-centered care. Patient-centered care is a hot topic word in Western medicine, but I think my version is a little bit different than what they mean.
Well, it's interesting. I think that a lot of people, like you mentioned, they don't see a connection between like the mind, the heart, the soul, the spirit, the body. They'll just look
Mm-hmm.
at, they'll think about what's going on in their head, but they don't connect it to what they eat or to like how they're feeling, or think it's just a medicine without changing your diet, without doing physical uh, assessments. A lot of times things are holistic, and a lot of times, like in the Western mindset, sometimes is very like narrow lane focused, and just think that this magic bullet's going to solve it, but that this mad one thing's going to do it, without looking at the whole piece. So you had been talking
Yeah.
about how you had migraines, and maybe were able to get to the root cause of the migraine, because maybe it wasn't just one thing. You seemed like you were stressed.
Oh, I was
You had
very
a
stressed.
long
Yes.
commute. You were
Yeah,
kind of,
long commute.
there's
I
a
was
lot of
working
other
a very,
factors.
yeah, there were a
Yeah, and
lot
then
of
maybe your
factors.
nutrition was
It
yeah,
was not great then. Yeah. No,
and I think
because
people don't put it together.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, but
yeah. It's just not how we're taught. It's not how we're taught as consumers, and it's also not how we're taught as practitioners in the Western, structure of things. So, in Western medicine, we're taught it's systems based, but it's not connecting the systems. It's like systems as little islands all throughout your body. You have cardiovascular, you have thyroid, you have, your reproductive, your gastric, but we very rarely in Western medicine look at the whole picture and connect all the dots, where that's exactly what functional medicine does. And you're exactly right. At that time in my life, because even though I had all these diagnoses, no one was talking about the food that I was putting in my body. No one was talking about the effect stress was having on my, not only my psyche, but also my body. No one was talking about how shift work and graveyard work was also adding another layer of inflammation and stress to the whole picture.
change your
On
sleep.
top of that,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah. I mean, it could be
yeah,
affecting your sleep, right? If you're doing a
oh,
graveyard shift, you're
absolutely.
interrupting your normal sleep. And then if you're not getting enough sleep, on top of like nutrition, if you're drinking too much coffee to stay up, then you don't come down, and then you have there's all these interactions that we find
Hmm.
that a lot of times like the primary care doctor doesn't tell you to like really think about. Like I go for my checkup, do they really ask me about what I've been eating? They just look at the
Right.
numbers, but they
Yeah.
don't think about it. Like a nutritionist, or think about a holistic doctor, like a naturopathic doctor is going to look at a lot of the stuff you're intaking, and actually suggest different behaviors, maybe less pesticides, more organic, more vegetables, things that would be greener for you, less packaged. And the packaged stuff is convenient, but then you start getting problems. And then we're like, well, why am I
Right.
having these gut problems? Well, because you're taking this, you're eating this, and it's like you're not connecting the dots. And then you take medicine, then you take a medicine for the side effect, and the side effect of that, and it keeps on progressing. You're like, what, did you get to the root cause? It seems like so
No,
you're trying to get to the root cause across the spectrum
exactly.
of multiple legs of your body, your spirit, your mind, and your heart, right? That's the
Yes.
point.
Yeah, I lovingly call Western medicine Band-Aid medicine because unfortunately for chronic illness, they're just throwing Band-Aids at ever-growing, expanding wounds and cuts. Now, if you actually have a wound and a cut and you need surgery, Western medicine's great for that. Definitely go to the ER, like if
Mm-hmm.
you've been in a horrible accident, don't skip the
Mm-hmm.
emergency room. But for chronic illness and even just maintaining or even the concept of creating wellness, Western medicine, unfortunately, is just not, that's not how they're educated or what they're focused on. And so, no fault to them, but, for those of us that do want to create our health and create our wellness, how do we do that? Where do we find those tools? And I think that's a perfect place for functional medicine to come in because functional medicine physicians, nurses, pharmacists, doctors, whoever, acupuncturists, even, they do collaborate with other practitioners and they do say, well, they will refer you to if they see another modality that they think can help you or support you in your journey to wellness, they will bring that in. So there's a lot less of this. Sometimes there can sometimes be this weird energy in Western medicine where you might have to like fight or advocate for yourself to get to a specialist if you feel like you need one. Whereas,
Yeah.
within the alternative healing space or the natural healing space, we're all about like, oh, this is what I do, but I know this person over here that does this also. So let's bring them in. We'll all work together. We'll get you, like where you want to be as fast and as soon as we can. And, you mentioned earlier that, if the doctor even asks you about your food, well, and unfortunately, the food guidelines that even some most registered dietitians and nutritionists, if they're again operating off what the Western medicine protocols and guidelines say, those are actually not the best food recommendations or guidelines. Like now we have the plate, but even if you look at the plate is still mostly carbs,
Yeah.
and it's like we know how damaging carbs and sugar
Yeah.
is to the
It's not.
body. Like, and we're still demonizing certain fats,
Yeah.
and we're still telling patients to eat low fat, high fiber, all this other stuff that has been proven to just like drive us further into inflammation and further into disease. So,
Yeah.
so again, good on them if you're asking, but I
Is this
take it with
interesting?
a grain of salt.
They also, like when you go through your Western medicine practice, there's a lot of it that's just controlled by these big conglomerate healthcare companies, insurance companies. And then what you run into is even if you go ask for a specialist, then the plan kicks in and said, well, we don't support that. We don't support this
Right.
doctor. We don't, there's some things they won't pay for. So if you
Yeah.
want to do something through the Western thing, they put limits. That they'll say, well, we're no longer. I'm a diabetic, and suddenly my Blue Cross suddenly said they're not going to let me take the insulin I've been taking for 15 years. They suddenly decided they didn't want to cover it because they didn't want to pay for it. So that has nothing to do with my health. It has something to do with them
Right.
not wanting to pay for something when I'm
Right. It's
paying
all
for a
money.
service, and then they're making a decision saying they don't want to pay. It has nothing to do with the quality of the care or the fact that my body was used to this and now suddenly they want to shift it. So I had to go take on my own. I went to a Canadian pharmacy and got it that way.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, yeah, I'm going to go to a Canadian pharmacist and do it the way I want. But it's like you have to go through hoops, and sometimes you need to go get a naturopath. They'll just like or a holistic plan doctor or somebody like yourself. is talking about, these other modalities, other things that we can get into, the whole idea of wellness outside the Western space. Like if you get into like,
Mhm.
energy healing and other types of things you're talking about that people might not be familiar with. And maybe we can go into some of those other
Sure.
aspects because I think
Yeah.
you were talking about in some of these things is like energy stagnicities, emotional storage and trauma storage. These are not things that if you go to a Western doctor, like, what's that? They'll be like, they
Right.
won't know what you're talking about.
Right, exactly. Oh, and I was on one show, a good friend of mine, but she's like, "I don't think stagnicities is actually a word." I'm like, "Well, whatever. I'm inventing it." So what is that? It just means like every experience we have, whether it's a trauma, big T, little t, a heartbreak, a loss, something that's seems emotionally significant is stored in our body, and it creates an imprint in our cellular structure. And now we know that, actually backed up by
Mm.
scientific research, that this whole concept of being triggered is because when your body is, or when your mind is re-exposed to something that it sees as familiar from that previous experience that left that imprint, then it triggers that physical fight or flight. It can trigger, epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol,
Yeah,
any of those, those literal physical visceral
fight or flight.
reactions. Yeah, exactly. Or even freeze sometimes, so that's real. And
Mm.
again, that's a perfect example of something energetic that triggered something physical in your body. So if you've not processed the emotion, the trauma, the experience, whatever it is, then it is still in your body. And so every time now you are going to be triggered when you are re-exposed to whatever that stimulus originally was. So the key there is to, process it, to allow yourself to feel those emotions, to work through it with a practitioner that you feel safe with, that creates a safe space for you, and so that you don't hold that energy there. Because what happens, let's say like you hold this energy in your abdomen, or even like, let's say a heartbreak, a horrible breakup that you had, and you're holding that energy in your heart space. Later on down the road, then you could, develop breast cancer, you could develop a heart attack or heart disease, you could develop, cancer in your abdomen, or some sort of like inflammatory bowel stress response. So these
Hmm.
emotional things actually do can turn into physical ailments if we don't address them. And the classic thing in Western culture is just to push down, ignore, ignore, buffer, 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 like numb, numb, numb with
Yeah,
whatever it is, whether it's food, alcohol, drugs, porn, sex, any of it, shopping, social media. Just don't feel. That sort of become like Western culture's mantra about almost everything. Don't feel, it's too hard. But really, we need to feel, we need to move through these things, allow these things to move through us so that we're not holding on to them and they're not being stuck in us, causing problems, sometimes immediately or later. It just depends.
yeah. It seems like a lot of times they go, if you're growing up in certain households, there's certain mindsets that are like they're not open to freedom of expression. They're not open to revealing, frailty. They look at that as weakness. They look at that as not being stoic. And so then
Hmm.
then you end up pushing things down. You can't if you're in a household and your mom and your dad don't want to hear the things you have to say because they, maybe, well, we just toughed it out, and grandpa
Yeah.
toughed it out, and granddad, great granddad toughed it out, so you should tough it out. And that's the
Yeah.
problem is they so then they feel, and then you may go into a spiritual session like based on your religion, and it continues like you can't talk about that, you can't express this, you can't say that, you can't even admit who you are if you don't
Yeah.
fit the paradigm. And so these things become so it seems like very top down, kind of controlled
Mhm.
environments that don't allow you to be express yourself. So then you numb yourself, like you said, like you numb yourself, or you try to push it down. If you don't numb it, you try to block it, and then people don't realize your organs start to have reactions, or your gut has a reaction. Then you have, you get IBS, or you get like some kind of problem in your abdomen, or you start to have heart problems, or you start to have lung problems, and you're like, why? Well, because you're
Mhm.
not dealing with the truth. Being a creative person, I'm an artist, so I tend to use art therapy and music to totally express exactly what I feel into pieces of art. And so I feel it's very cathartic. And I've got a space in my household. All of my whole family are artists, my wife, my daughter, and we don't push down that. We say that that's good. And so we're very much like in the kind of bleeding edge of that type of stuff. And we don't really push anything down in that way.
That's
So
amazing.
we were very expressive.
Mm.
There's some people that we can't talk to because all they want to talk about is the weather, and they can't talk to us on any other level other than sports or weather.
Mhm.
so, so you're like, okay, but that's where you are. So okay,
Right. Yeah. Got to meet people where they are. But yeah, I think what you were saying, like,
yeah,
growing up in households like that, even where at like maybe super young ages, you're told, stop crying, don't cry. And so even before we really have sort of a lot of these conscious associations, we're being told to disconnect from our emotions, and we're being taught to ignore our intuition. So, I teach a lot of intuition classes and a lot of different modalities. Reiki is one of the main ones. I'm a master attuned and trained teacher in three different Reiki modalities: Asuli, angelic, and crystal. But I also teach a channeling and just intuition in general. And I get this question a lot: is, well, do I have to be special or gifted to be psychic or intuitive? And the answer is no. We all have the ability to tap into our own intuition, because we are all connected to source. We all came from source. We're made up of the exact same things that the stars, that the planets, that this planet Earth is made of. We are the stars. If you look at our cellular makeup down to each atom and molecule and element. And
mm-hmm.
so it's just a matter of reconnecting, of re-remembering, and undoing so much of that learning or that conditioning that we endured as our tiny human selves.
Well, as an artist, one of the things I run into a lot with some artists is trying to be too perfect. And part of
Oh
being
yeah.
an artist that's very open is that I feel that musicians are we can channel. There are a lot of times the poets talk about the muse, they talk about the universe, and a lot of musicians. I am into freeform jazz and experimental music,
Cool.
so I'm not into trying to make it exactly perfect. I'm into actually experiencing what I call stream of consciousness. The happy accident is kind of like what like Hendrix. An example of this is Hendrix was one of my favorite guys in music, was playing with the Isley Brothers. He was in a recording session, and suddenly he just went off and did something that wasn't the song. And then they asked, "Well, what are you doing?" Well, the universe gave me this new vibe, and I had to put it down. And he was the kind of artist that it would just come to him, and he wouldn't care what the
Hmm.
setting was. He would put it down, and he'd get in trouble because people said, "Well, you're not supposed to do that. You're in the session. You're supposed to be controlled." And it's like, no, if the universe
Yeah.
gives me something like this, I'm going to use it. And a lot of people are not willing to do that because they've been
Right.
told they have to sit in the box, they got to be in the cube. And you see the artists who kind of push it are the ones who are willing to kind of take that
Hmm.
and go with it. And I think that's kind of like my experience is within a world where people are trying to be so perfect because of all these machines and AI and editing to make the perfect track. I kind of go back, well, listen to this song from the Stones in '72. Is it perfect? No. But is it vital? Yes, because of its imperfection, because it's not perfect,
Exactly.
because they were
Yeah.
just trying to be what it, just let that song be, let it happen. So many people are trying to make things into what they think is going to be expected. They just keep on repeating themselves or trying to fit in the frames.
Yeah.
And I think it's, in terms of like a mindset, if you have that mindset, then you don't challenge, you don't listen to your body. So you go to the doctor, you're too scared to tell the doctor what you're really feeling. Like my father, he used to like, well, the doctor's going to find it. The doctor's not going to find it if you don't tell him. And he used to be like,
Right.
he wouldn't tell the doctor, well, don't take the test and they'll figure it out. It's like my mom would get so mad. It's like, what's the point in telling me if you're not going to tell the
Yeah.
doctor what you're feeling?
Yeah, I totally get it. And it's interesting, this whole concept of perfection. Like, we're humans. We I think our souls chose to incarnate here on this earth, which is a very imperfect realm, in order to experience differences, dichotomies, polarity, challenges, physical senses. We are a perfect soul that came from perfection in terms of source, God, whatever you want to call it. But while we're here on this earth, perfection is actually unattainable. But it's the journey back
Hmm.
to that soul self that we learn, that we're challenged, that we grow. And I was just having this conversation with someone else before we hopped on here together. And and if we can just shift our perception of those challenges, of that growth, into, wow, isn't this fascinating? Be curious, be willing to roll with the ups and the downs. And even when we're low and we're down, we know it's just temporary. So what's that next thing around the corner that could be an amazing opportunity? And that, again, it's a shift in perspective, but it's an opportunity for us to take this life that is imperfect and embrace it for that beauty, and realize, like you just said, it's the imperfections that create the good song, that create that beautiful piece of art. That even in nature, yes, there is sacred geometry, there's symmetry, there is, that perfect symmetry in nature, but still there's so much imperfection. And that should be celebrated, because we're all
Yeah, a
each
lot of variation.
imperfect, wonderful individuals.
Well, it's like the other thing is it's like this place for meditation or clearing out energy and raising vibration. And a lot of times in music, like sometimes we can get trapped into this kind of thing. I can get trapped into a loop where I'm sitting at something for like 8 hours trying to get something right. The
Hmm.
better thing to do is to kind of walk away and kind
Hmm.
of clear out, kind of shake it off, because you get into this thing where you're getting diminishing returns. And I think this
Hmm.
happens in work too. I'm a software guy, and I see a programmer that is sitting at their cube for 4 hours straight, and they're not getting it done. And people would measure them. The management going to measure them and say, well, because he's sitting there, he's not taking breaks. They're like, but is it actually solving the problem? No, it's not. So the counterintuitive sometimes is like, you actually have to shake it off and walk away, or kind of
Hmm.
find a way to clear out your frustration or your anxiety. What I've seen in both those situations is like your anxiety gets so great that you're not productive. And
Right.
so if you can kind of shake it off and find a way to recharge, you can get back to something that's going to work. And some people just think they would just keep on plugging at the same thing, and it's not solving the problem.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to bring in meditation, and to also highlight the fact that meditation doesn't have to be sitting still in a room by yourself in silence, telling yourself to have no thoughts. I don't think that's meditation. Meditation to me can be walking, breathing, inhaling the beautiful nature around you, bringing in the sunlight into your body. But it can be
Mm-hmm.
sitting still. And when it's sitting still, just listening to your breathing, that beautiful rhythm in and
Yeah.
out that never stops. That's the one thing that keeps us alive is breathing. That's the best and easiest way to meditate. Guided meditations are fantastic. I still, even though I've been meditating for, I don't know, I started meditating in pharmacy school when I was suffering from insomnia. So that was a long time ago, but I still love guided meditation. So there's, I also like, I think we sometimes put these perspective of perfection even on things like that, these tools that are meant to help us, that are meant to sort of like
Yeah.
get us out of our head. We're like, oh, but it's not good enough, or I'm not doing it right, or like I must be screwing it up somehow. So um, just be gentle with yourself, allow
Well,
yourself the
sometimes,
space
like,
to
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
yeah, I mean, because I'm a Buddhist, and there's some Buddhist, I'm a Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist, and sometimes we do our chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and there's some people that perceive like, well, if I chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo for 8 hours straight, that's going to lead me to some kind of perfect state, and I'm like, that's not necessarily what Nichiren Daishonin was talking about. That you don't,
Hmm.
that just because you did it for 8 hours, this doesn't mean that you could do it for 15 minutes. You could just be out in the woods doing it, and you could get a brilliant result. It doesn't have to be that kind of sequential thing. You're putting to become a Western mindset onto something that didn't have to have that, because it is
Right.
whatever suits that moment, and it could be different. It doesn't have to be the same. And that's
Hmm.
where I think people make the mistake, is the fact that it doesn't have to be perfect. You could do it with a group. You could be by yourself. You could be, in front of your your at your meditation point, or you could be out in the woods, because nature is a cathedral. You could be on a
Hmm.
boat. You could be on a canoe. You could just be at peace. You could be even on the train and get yourself into a state where you kind of zoom into it and kind of do a breathing exercise. You could be whatever suits the moment that you need to do that. And that's where, well, then that means there's no right way. Well, like, why? Yeah, there's probably not a perfect right way. It's whatever suits what you need at that time.
Right. Yeah. So I think this takes us back to learning to listen to ourselves and being willing to try different things. So maybe you try, just the breathing. Maybe you try the walk in nature. Maybe you try the mantra meditation. I know when I was teaching myself to love running, because for years I had hated it, but I decided to train for a triathlon with a friend of mine, and I knew the running was going to be the biggest challenge for me. So I thought, well, I'm going to teach myself to love this and enjoy it so I'm not miserable. And I did that with a mantra meditation. So as I would run, I would chant the Ganesha mantra. And I don't know if you can see it, but the little tie-dye picture back there behind me is Ganesha. He is the one of the
Hmm.
Indian gods of removing obstacles. And so I would run and chant in time with Gun Ganapataye Namaha. And I would just do that over and over. I'd have like great meditative music with no words playing. And and finally I got to the point where I enjoyed it. So, like just play with it. It's supposed to be fun and enjoyable. And like you said, like when you're pounding away at something, it's time, and you catch yourself, because eventually you'll catch yourself in that cycle of not making progress. That's your cue. Get up, go to the
Yeah,
bathroom, go take a walk, go outside, maybe go stand on your head. I mean, whatever is going to help you shift your
yeah. You
perspective and give
gotta
yourself a
recharge.
break. Yeah, yeah. Our brains definitely need breaks.
Well, we were talking about, like, with like breathing exercise and kind of clearing your head, like in a world where people are so connected by smartphones and social media, that when you if you can disconnect from all that and get yourself like a kind of calm spot of like just peace without the noise. Because I think a
Hmm.
lot of times, if you go back and look at a lot of the great art that was before all this technology, there's because there was
Hmm.
like there's actually room for like silence. Like a lot of times, if you're an artist, like they talk to a lot of I've watched so many documentaries by different artists, and they would say, it's kind of when I just went off, didn't give myself a bunch of expectations. I gave myself some peace. I just went off somewhere, and
Hmm.
it's like I needed to kind of disconnect and not really try to force it, that things will happen when you give yourself some breathing room and you give yourself some
Yeah,
contemplation time where you don't have to be so
exactly.
tied up by the world. And a lot of people are so like, well, I got to get this on a plan. I got to put it on the project, put it on the whiteboard. Yeah, you have to, at some point, you do that. But there's a lot of stuff that kind of blue sky stream of consciousness that you have to trust yourself. I always tell people as an artist, if you trust yourself and just go into like a stream of consciousness session, just do something off the cuff and record it. And I've talked to authors and all kinds of artists, that, painters, that if they just go at it and kind of just like in a flow state and get themselves into this kind of flow state, it will actually come because you've kind of let go. You had to let go the overthinking. I think
Yeah.
that's in this world today. There's so much overthinking.
Yeah, well, and again, I think that's because of our conditioning. I mean, how many of us were daydreamers as little kids and we were, like taught in school, hey, come back over here, pay attention, or even maybe told by our parents daydreaming is a waste of time. You got to get out there, you got to go, work or find a skill or, a trade or something like that. So I definitely think that, daydreaming is valuable. It's what allows us to even think that some of these, you know, um, concepts or adventures or, anything is possible. And, so much of the self-help world talks about manifestation. Well, in order to manifest, you have to know what you want. And there's, I think, a whole slew of people out there that have no idea what they want because they haven't even given themselves the chance to dream or daydream about it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
because they've been told that dreaming is kind of silly. If you're told that you need to be more pragmatic, you have to be more stoic, you have to be more, you know, realistic. Well, what you find with artists or creative types is, sometimes they push the boundaries and the bleeding edge of that. So if you're going to be told that that's silly or that's not something you could do, that's only something like Tennyson could do or Hemingway could do or this person could do, then you kind of put yourself out of the running. All human beings are inherently creative. But if you feel that that's only like the top 1 to 5% of the population is capable of
Hmm.
doing that, then you put yourself out of the game. And I think that's a mistake because you don't have to be a musician or a painter. You can be very artistic in your day to day life with how you operate
Hmm.
in your life. If you take if from that point of view, you come from like a very creative point of view, you can kind of rebrand your whole life to be who you really want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it can show up in your wardrobe. It can show up in, your hair and your makeup in, like, I know a variety of ways, like you said, in your daily life. So, yeah, just, I feel like we need this almost like a renaissance of a willingness to just show up as us. I think social media has
Mm,
been an interesting phenomenon to watch unfold. I was born in 1980. I'm at the tail end of Gen X. So I was a kid born
mm,
before any social media existed. We were, locked outside with as kids and given a pitcher of water and said, "Don't come back until after dark," or at
yeah,
least come back by dark. Like go play outside. Don't bother us adults inside.
yeah.
Um, so, but now we have, a whole
I
new
got the same
generations that
thing.
have been raised inside, and grew up on
Yeah,
video games and all this
yeah. With their
technology. So
imagination, yeah.
yeah.
If you imagine, I'm a child
So
of the '70s. I grew up with
mhm.
Lego, erector sets,
Oh
stuff
yeah.
that we had to just make up things. So we didn't have the
Yeah.
games. In 1972, you got a Lego set and you built your own world. You got an erector set, you got Lincoln Logs, and you had imagination and you made things up. I remember
Yeah.
playing with my brothers and we just made things up. We just had very, very vivid imaginations and made these worlds up and drew our crayons and did stuff and construction paper and put things together. And we didn't didn't have to be guided. It wasn't like, oh, I'm in a video game in an open world, I'm being guided. And so many people are being guided by all these things without coming up with their own thing. And I think that maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm so creative. And a lot of people, that I know that grew up in that time are musicians, are artists, are photographers, because that's what they grew up with, is having that open imagination and not being given prepackaged kind of imagination, which I think
Yeah.
is kind of limiting. If you're getting so many packaged things that are supposed to be for your kids and they're just playing this preset thing, where's
Mm-hmm.
the imagination to build your own world?
Yeah. Well, and there's so speaking of coming back to the whole meditation and the concept of manifestation too, is that in like I already mentioned, like you have to know what you want. Give yourself that time to daydream and come up with different scenarios. But then another piece is feeling the energy. So once you've decided that there is something out there that you want to create in your life, one big step that I feel like is missed a lot is the feeling. So, how will it feel when you have it? Already acting as if it's there
Mm-hmm.
in your life. So, whether it's money, a new job, a partner, a relationship, any of menagerie of things. Maybe even it's like having a hit song or, having your piece of art shown in, a famous gallery. Really spending time to sit in that feeling so that, again, we talked about that cellular imprint. So just like you can have a cellular imprint of a negative experience, you can have a cellular imprint of a positive one too. So imprinting that positive experience, those positive feelings into your body, that actually helps manifest and attract more of that into your life. It's called the law of attraction, and a lot of times it's written off
Yeah.
as woo woo, but there is science behind it because all of this
Well,
has vibration. And so when you're putting that vibration out, just like music has vibration, when you're putting it out, you're putting out that resonance in, the world of physics. That's what's coming back to you. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So think about that too. When there's something in your life that is not there that you want to be there. Um, yeah.
well, I feel that you can self-actualize. You see it with a lot of artists. Like they have a dream, they have a vision, they put it out there, and like the law of attraction, if they believe in themselves,
Hmm.
then it becomes infectious. And then you see, like, well, how did they do that? Well, they had a really strong belief, and some people look at that, well, that's arrogant. And if you look at a lot of people who have become the CEO, become like the author, become like the big life coach, it's because they had this kind of vision and they actualize that vision, and then the law of attraction comes in and then people feel it. And I'm a big believer in sound waves. I'm a
Hmm.
synthesist. I design
Hmm.
sound waves, and when I play in concerts I can see what happens with the waveforms I create and how people react to them immediately. I immediately get feedback from the sounds I create from the audience. So you can
Yeah.
see it as a truth, right? When you're a musician, you can see how these sound waves, which came from your voice or your instrument, affect other people. And it's not something you can touch, but you can hear it and you can feel it.
Hmm.
And what we call the vibe, right? How you like
Yeah.
people pick up these vibes. As human beings, you go into a room, you can feel like there's bad vibes. I'm getting like bad feelings for that. That's a real thing. You're in
Hmm.
tune with it, just like you're when you hear a song and you get the beat and you start moving your body, you're picking that up. But you can pick up the negative and you can pick up the positive, and you can
Right.
pick up the melancholy. You can pick up all those things in waves. And those waves are coming out from your brain and from your mind and from your soul and from your body and from nature, from everything.
Hmm.
And you can pick it up from everything if you are open to it. Indigenous peoples believe this. Eastern concepts believe this. It's just the Western concepts saying in some cases they believe parts of it. but they don't
Right.
believe all
Well,
of it.
yeah. And
And you
now we
kind of have
have,
to embrace all of it to kind of get where you want to go.
yeah, exactly. Well, and that's why I talked about, I like to say, like, I'm bringing, the science and the woo-woo together to show that they really are just mirrors of each other. And our heart is one of the biggest signal emitters of our bodies. And there's an organization called the Heart Math Institute that has really focused on this, and they've come up with um, different models and ways to create heart coherence. And essentially, it's a way to bring down the stress level, to bring your body into what they call a state of coherence, which as waves would be like waves that are in sync with each other, versus dissonance, which if you saw it as waves, would be like
Yeah,
waves that are like
like
not in sync with each
harmony.
other.
Yeah, like a
Yeah.
harmony.
Yeah. So, like,
Yeah,
exactly like you
dissonant
said. Yeah,
waveforms versus harmonious waveforms. Yeah,
exactly.
because I
Yeah.
mean, when
Yeah.
we're in music, right, we can get into like we can tune to get in tune
Mhm.
with the key. So if you're in a
Right.
band and somebody's in the key, it's a C major or G minor or whatever, and they're not in that key, it will be very dissonant. And then you say, well, that's not clicking. So you can immediately see you're out of sync. And then you can actually
Right.
get into sync. You can do like a waveform sync. And I have oscilloscopes that show when my waves are in sync and out of sync. I can see things that are dissonant. I can see the white noise, the pink noise, the blue noise, all the different types of noise forms. The different that
Mhm.
we give them colors in music, like pink noise, black noise,
Oh, cool.
and they have
Mhm.
different effects versus like the dissonant tones versus like the things that are like feedbacking or like really jarring or things that are very harmonious and very symphonic. And when you
Right.
start to understand how these waves work in a song and in a structure, and when you're playing with other people, you can get into kind of nonverbal communication, like where a lot of artists, if you're in a group, when you're in tune, when you're in sync. You don't even have to say it; you can feel it. And if you're
Mhm.
playing with a
Yeah.
group, like in jazz, like we feel it. We will sometimes we'll be totally harmonious, and then sometimes we go into dissonance or chaos, and then we come back. We go back
Mhm.
out. And it's kind of like life. And some points are very dissonant, and some points are very harmonious, and some points are kind of in between. And that's kind of how life is. You're trying to find that harmonious point, but some places it goes off. Is like
Mhm.
can you play off of those moments and come back to like
Right.
harmony?
Yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah. One of my
that's like the
yeah,
goal.
one of my teachers used to say, it's not about being perfect, but it's how quickly we come back. How quickly we come back into harmony, into
Yeah.
coherence with ourself, with our inner being. Yeah, with being comfortable with where we are in this world at this moment.
And that kind of goes into the levels. Like if you think about like your your glucose level, right? Your blood pressure level, your blood oxygen level. Like if you're out of sync and your oxygen level is bad, your glucose is too high or it's too low. Your blood, all these different levels. They're things that you can get into. Like, well, there's food that's affecting why your levels are where they are. Like if you're a diabetic and you're going into too much carbs and too much soda and too much alcohol, you're gonna get really bad A1C. You're gonna get
Mhm.
really bad numbers. It could take you out.
Yeah.
I'm a diabetic because I have like a continuous glucose monitor. I can see where I am, and I can
Mhm.
see like if I do what's not recommended, like go crazy with a pancake, well, I really shouldn't have that pancake, because it's gonna knock it up. So you should
Yeah.
go like have something that's more, you know, better for your number, and you can immediately
Mhm.
see the consequences of what you do. Now the tech is there where you can see, well, if I do this, it immediately does this to my body, and then now I have a
Right.
responsibility to like make sure I stay in the right zone.
Yeah, I have finally been able to come up with a way to integrate continuous glucose monitors into my practice for those that don't have them, because having that immediate feedback is so important and so valuable. not only because of the food is great, and depending on where you are in your journey with healing your diabetes, you might be at the very beginning where you're just figuring out like how much will this apple throw me up versus how much will, like you said, the pancake versus if I just have a piece of bacon, what will that do? But look at
Mm.
those numbers when you're stressed and notice what happens to those numbers when you're stressed out. If you're
Yeah, they go
stressed,
bad.
you're anxious, you're all wound up, they go up. And I have so many of my clients that, like, after, 2 weeks of the food plan and, making all these changes, and they're like feeling really good about themselves. And they might not have the continuous glucose monitor, but they'll still do the finger sticks. And they'll come back and say, but my numbers are still high. Why? Why are my numbers still high? I'm like, how is your stress level? Let's talk about stress and what it really does to the
Yeah.
body. And, it is not pseudoscience and is not woo woo to say that stress causes inflammation. It shoots up your blood glucose because it goes into fight or flight, which also tells your body, okay, you're going to have to run soon. You better start making glucose. So, again, this whole concept of, well, I have to
They
eat
need
so
to
many
push it up.
carbs a day.
Yeah.
No, your body's going to make the glucose that it needs when it needs to. So keep that in mind. And again, if your doctor is
Yeah.
saying, this is how many carbs you should have every day, again, grain of salt. Because, is your
But
doctor
yeah.
also saying, yeah, feel free to jump in and interrupt me at any time.
No, but it makes sense because what I find is like, because I'm a Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist, when I chant and I do my meditation and my breathing exercises, I can see my numbers kind of do really good.
Hmm.
If I was in a meeting with my boss and she stresses me out, then I can see my numbers go up, right? And it's like, so I can see, like, okay, I did this thing that, and this is not food. This is something that happened, right? Where I'm doing meditation, I'm kind of controlling my breathing, controlling my not being stressed out, kind of knocking my pressure down. But if I'm in a meeting and I get stressed, then I can see that number go up. You can same way as if you drank some soda or you ate a candy when you shouldn't do that. Well, it's going to do that if you're, depending on what type of diabetic you are. That you can
Right.
see that like there's the things that you physically do and there's things that are less physical, but still have an impact because they trigger like a fight or flight type of thing where it's like in a adrenal response and it's like cortisol, and then you're
Yeah.
getting stressed out because like the wolf's there. Well, my boss is the wolf.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I gotta run.
Exactly. I just
like
want to
it's
run
the
from
same
my
kind of
boss.
feeling you're out there, and it's like the same. Like, is well, that social situation that triggers you, right? That you're out there in the world, and then you get triggered like the wolf, which was triggered
Hmm.
our ancestors, or the saber tooth was triggering our ancestors to get. But it's like it's still real. It's
Right.
just a different thing, and now you actually might get triggered more than the wolf. Because like in the
Right.
modern world, there's all these triggers there, and this is where I think what you're talking about is like learning how to de-stress from those real situations that are, it's conversation or it's a interaction that's causing the stress. It's not like somebody's chasing you, but if it does the same thing.
Yeah, and actually being willing and investing in yourself in that time to figure out what is triggering me, especially if you're one of those persons or people walking around that has just sort of a high level, low level, whatever level of like constant stress, constant anxiety, maybe even, dealing with some depression too. We really need to hone in and figure out what is the source of this, because if yes, there's western medicine treatments, but really finding a coach, a therapist, some sort of practitioner to work with to help you get to the root cause of these and start processing and healing from them. Because if you continue to live through just like constant stress, then that's when inflammation and disease develops. I mean, really, it's inevitable, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, we've got so many people that you wonder if they're diabetic because of these stressful situations that if they went to an alternative type of therapy, not this
Hmm.
Western medicine with insulin and all the other medicines they give to diabetics. Is like if you actually embraced other types of treatments, that if you actually
Hmm.
started, like you said, identify the source of your stress,
Yeah,
identify mitigation at the things that you can do that maybe aren't medicine. It maybe it's a mindset,
exactly.
maybe it's nutrition on top of the mindset, along with physical activity and maybe some medicine, because maybe you type 1, you do need insulin, right? You can't get
Right.
away from it. You might be in a situation where you have to have it. But it's like the holistic picture is like you look at everything, right? You look at everything that you might have to do.
Absolutely. And again, we want to be creating health and creating wellness, not just trying to get through this life, with as little disease as possible, right? So, how do we do that? We have to look at our thoughts. We have to look at our lifestyle. How are we sleeping? How much are we moving? What is our community like? Do we have an artist or musician community? Do we have a church or spiritual community? What kind of support system do we have? And then, like home life, how is life at home? Is it good, bad? Could it be better? There's always room for investigation and tweaking. And to me, like constantly looking for ways to improve and or help maintain what I've already created for myself, because things are ever evolving. Like our bodies are constantly changing, and that's a good thing. So the only thing constant in this life is change. We just have to figure out how to make that change positive
Yeah.
for ourselves.
I think some people want things to have like, oh, I want to be able to just solve it at one moment in time, and that's going to be my solution. What I find is like, because you're constantly evolving and things around you are evolving, it's never going to be like this one size fits all. It's all, even when you learn techniques, you're going to have to adjust. You're going to have to adjust
Hmm.
to like every scenario, things that you didn't anticipate. And so I think a lot of times, there's no easy answer. Like life is life. It things are going to
Right.
happen that you're going to have to make adjustments, and that's why you have to have therapists or coaches or other people to help you along the way. And it's you're never kind of done until you're done. The way I look at it is
Right.
like, as an artist, like I continually evolve as an artist because I want to keep on. I could keep on doing the same thing, but I find it
Yeah.
more interesting to try things I don't know how to do, because then
Yeah.
it challenges me, and then that makes me happy. Some people are uncomfortable with that, but I think in your life you have to kind of progress by doing things that you might be a little unsure of, but you should explore it. And I think that's why our brains are built to be able to do that. And we're never really done learning.
No, no. One of my teachers is Abraham Hicks, Esther Hicks, and the collective Abraham likes to say the work is never done. And then something else that I really love, that what they say is happy, healthy, happy, healthy, happy, healthy, dead. And I love that concept of of choosing to be happy, healthy, happy until we're not, until we move on back
Yeah,
into the non-physical.
into another space. Yeah, another.
Yeah, back to the
Well, I
source
think
from
what
which
we've
we
had is a
came.
very illuminating conversation. Very
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very
yeah, thank
metaphysical,
you.
but being an artist, we're kind of in that space that I think a lot of my audience, because we're artists and we're creators, we're in the more predisposed to listen to what you're saying. Then that's why I bring folks on the podcast is I want people to have these kind of expansive conversations that kind of challenge paradigms and get people to think, which is what the whole purpose of the show is to hear what other people have to say, and maybe you
Yeah.
can take a nugget of what we said and find a way to integrate it into your point of view, or at least listen to it and understand it, and then look into it. So again, look at the link we have here for drlaramay.com, and that'll be fully clickable, so you'll be able to investigate all, getting an appointment with you. Maybe you can tell the folks again, if they click on that link, how they can connect with you.
Sure. Yeah. So go to drlaramay.com/sessions to sign up for a session with me, whether that's life coaching, energy healing, or functional medicine. You can also pop over to drlaramay.com/store if you're wanting to maybe buy a program that will be more self-guided. I have one of the first ones you'll see on there is actually called Blood Sugar Mastery, because I do work with a lot of patients and clients with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. And so helping bring truth and real information that's going to help people has been my passion ever since COVID. I shifted my practice from gut health over to type 2 diabetes as a focus, because I'm so passionate. And unfortunately, Western medicine does such a poor job when it comes to managing and helping diabetics. So anyway, so yes, so drlaramay.com/sessions or /store. Those are two links that can take you to either a live session with me, or you can buy a bundle, or you can buy a self-guided program. There's lots of options.
Well, again, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. It was very informative, and I hope people will check out your link and book an appointment with you, or to talk to you, or check out the offering from your store. Again, thank you for being on the show. And this will be out on all the platforms. We're on all the major podcast platforms. We'll be out there tomorrow. We'll be on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch as we were live. But all the other platforms will be on tomorrow. So we'll give you that landing page for your audience. And again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.